Happy Saturday to you. I'm just going to jump right into this because in less than 90 minutes from now, I'm going to be starting my Patreon exclusive live stream. Unlike a lot of content creators on YouTube, I don't do public live streams. Well, I actually did one. My very first, believe it or not, my very first YouTube video I did when I first got on YouTube, active on YouTube in early April of 2017 was actually a live stream. But because a lot of people weren't familiar with me, I didn't really have nobody watching. I think I had I don't know, maybe 5 to 10 people who was watching. But yeah, my very, very, very first video that I did on YouTube back in early April was actually a live stream. Oh, and the video quality was fuzzy. It just wasn't good video quality. But anyway, that said, I don't do public live streams. I only do live streams for my $5 and up subscribers, and then I do one for my $10 and up subscribers. So I usually do an average of 2 per month. Although there's been some months I've done as many as 3 Patreon exclusive live streams, but most months I do 2. I do one for $5 and up subscribers and one for $10 and up subscribers. The one today is for $5 and up subscribers. So anyway, yeah, I can't waste too much time because that's going to start in less than 90 minutes from now at 11:30 a.m. Eastern time. What else? Now this is an interesting day you could say in Black Manosphere history. Black Manosphere history. Because as everybody know, if there's one person I've feuded with and had back and forth beef with the most, as far as another black male on YouTube, it is Mumia Obsidian Ali. And on this day, how you always hear on different TV shows or online, they'll say, on this day in history, this happened. Yeah. On June 6th of 2017, 3 years ago today, was when me and Obsidian first fell out. Yep. I did a video called Direct versus Indirect Game in Preventing False Date Rape Charges. It was called Direct versus Indirect and Preventing False Date Rape Charges. And to give you the brief, I said I wasn't going to do any digressions, but I'm going to do a quick digression. Yeah, if people don't know the backstory, and say you're a fairly new follower and supporter of mine, and you might be wondering over the last few months, why is ARC and Obsidian always kind of going back and forth and getting into heated arguments? Well, the backstory was he and I were actually cool at one point. It started with he tagged me on Twitter in a podcast he did where he basically almost simultaneously complimented me and criticized me. This was in late August or early September of 2015. On a complimentary end, he said something to the effect of, Alan Roger Currie does give good advice. So he did give me my credit as far as the quality of my advice. He said, Alan Roger Currie does give some good advice. But he said, I don't think, and I'm paraphrasing his words, but he said, I don't think Alan Roger Currie is relatable. That was his criticism. He said, I don't think Alan Roger Currie is relatable. He said, because number one, he's very good looking, which is a flattering compliment. He said, Alan Roger Currie, he's very good looking. He comes from a 2-parent, upper middle class family. He's college educated. His parents are college educated. And he went on to basically suggest that, in so many words, he was trying to suggest that I was too bougie to be a relatable dating coach. He was basically like, Alan comes from a bougie background. And the average blue-collar brother, working-class brother, or brother from the hood is not going to be able to relate to Alan Roger Currie. And so I fired back. with a response. And to my pleasant surprise, he then issued an apology. He issued an apology. And I think it was in like mid to late September. He actually issued an apology to me on his YouTube channel. It's still up. I'll put the link, if I find it, I'll put the link in it. It's actually, the apology is still up. Now, he gave me an apology. Then about a month later, this guy who goes by the name Alex, aka Don Calypso, informed me that Obsidian was starting to heavily promote my book, The Possibility of Sex, which he offered to do a book signing of, and to a lesser extent, he was promoting Mo 1. Anyway, without getting into all the specific details, we were cool from roughly about late October, early November of 2015 until about late May, very early June of 2017. But the turning point in our relationship was I did that video. It's still up. It's called Direct versus Indirect and Preventing False Date Rape Charges. And in that video, I brought up the murderous incel, Elliot Rodger. I was making a point that, I see my battery's about to die. So I made the point in that video. I said, there's a lot of men in society that one of their biggest hurdles is that they cannot accept rejection. They cannot accept rejection. I said, once you get rejected by a woman, you need to just gracefully accept it and move on to the next woman. And then I went on to say, I said, but there's a lot of guys, like guys who are misogynist types or incel types, they can't handle rejection. And so a lot of them, when they get rejected, they'll like curse a woman out. In some cases, they will physically assault that woman, or in some cases, they will go as far as to murder that woman. We had an incident in Chicago that I've talked about in a couple of videos where a guy got rejected by this Middle Eastern woman on a college campus, and he murdered her. He literally murdered her. Anyway, Obsidian comes to my comment section, and basically he said three things. He had three criticisms of that video. One, he basically said, Alan, I disagree with you because I made the assertion that Mo 1 will prevent men from experiencing false date rape charges. He challenged that. That was one thing he challenged. He said, I disagree with you. He said, I don't care if you Mo 1, Mo 2, or Mo 3. I still think some of these women out here will try to falsely accuse you of date rape. So that was one thing he disagreed with. Second thing, on the subject of direct versus indirect, I basically made the argument, as I always do, that direct game, verbal game, is better and more effective than indirect verbal game. And he disagreed with that. He said, no, I'm not sure about that. I think both have their strengths and weaknesses. He said, I think indirect game can be just as effective, if not more effective, than direct game. Now, why would anybody, logically, why do you think I would have a problem with that? At this point, this guy was promoting three of my books. He was promoting Possibility of Sex. Second most book he was promoting was The Beta Male Revolution. And a distant third was Mo 1. Why would I want somebody to promote my books who's going to make the argument that indirect is more effective than direct? So that was strike number 2 that led to us falling out. And then third, the biggest one of the three was that he made this comment about Elliot Rodger has a right to his preferences for wanting to share the company of beautiful, sexy women. And I was like, what are you talking about? What does that mean? He has a right. He said, just what I said. He said, Alan, it sounds like you're trying to say that men like myself should settle for women that we don't find physically attractive or sexually appealing. That we should settle for women that we just are not really attracted to. And I said, I never said that. I said, you putting words in my mouth. I never said that. I just said, if you're rejected that you need to move the fuck on to the next moment. But we went anyway, without getting all the details. We went back and forth, and I wrote him an email where I said, on a personal level, I don't have anything against you. You are who you are. I am who I am. But I said on any potential, as far as the potential for us being business collaborators of some sort, I was like, that shit's over. That shit's done. I basically was like, you will never be a business collaborator of mine based on your commentary in my comment section. And so for all the, most people who listen to me knew that backstory already, but for the small percentage of guys that have always wondered, like, why is ARC and Obsidian always tend to have back and forth beef? That's what started it. It was literally this day 3 years ago. It started on June 6th of 2017. Yeah. So that's what started it all. Now, we've had some moments since then where we've been combination of cordial and respectful to each other, but we've never gone back to being cool like we were prior to that fallout on June 6th of 2017. We've never gone back to being cool like we were, and 99.9% chance we never will. And see, the quick clarification, then I'll move on, is that some people think me and Obsidian don't get along because he harshly criticizes black women, and I don't like the fact that he harshly criticizes black women. And the reality is that has nothing to do with our falling out. That had nothing to do with our falling out. It's his strong opinions and harsh criticisms and insults of various aspects of black women's behavior. That had nothing to do with our falling out. But I noticed a lot of people over the last 2 to 3 years have felt like that had nothing to do with it. Again, the 3 main reasons why I fell out with Mumia Obsidian Ali in early June of 2017 was to do with that video called Direct versus Indirect, and the fact that, number one, he tried to argue that Mo 1 is not an effective preventive measure. It's not an effective measure to prevent false, invalid date rape charges. Number 2, he tried to argue that indirect verbal game was just as effective, if not more effective, than direct verbal game. And third, he came with this arbitrary straw man argument of Elliot Rodger is entitled to his preferences. Every man is entitled to desire a woman's romantic companionship or strictly sexual companionship, but no man on this earth, including myself, no man is entitled to actually have a woman's romantic or strictly sexual companionship. You have the right to desire it, but you do not have the right to actually have it. Facts. Anyway, the reason why I'm doing, again, shouldn't be. I always say that. It shouldn't be too long. If you notice, on both my Patreon page yesterday and my community page here on YouTube yesterday, I uploaded a revised chart, an updated chart of, because I always get a lot of game questions. Alan, what's your definition of game? How would you specifically define and describe game and so on? And what's your specific distinction between direct verbal game and indirect verbal game and that type of thing? So what I did to somewhat answer a lot of those type of questions is I uploaded my own personal game chart that highlights the 5, what I feel are the 5 general types of game. In my strong opinion, I'm sure other people might have their own different classifications for what is game, but based on my experiences and observations, there's really only 5 general types of game. Technically, there's 2 more additional types of nonverbal game, but they're so despicable in this day and age that I just refuse to include them. And that would be what some guys would call physical coercion game. Now, there's some guys who believe in physical coercion game. I know of at least 2 PUAs that came out with books promoting physical coercion game, where they basically believe, like, for example, you should just go to a club and just grab a woman, grab her ass, grab her tits, and almost basically try to physically force her to submit to you and respond to your sexual advances. Yeah, I want to say both of them got banned from a couple of countries. I'm not going to mention their names. I remember one had a Go crowdfunding page, and the other one, he made national headlines, I want to say. He got banned in the United Kingdom, Australia. But yeah, these two guys, they were promoting what many would call physical coercion game. Physical coercion game. That's just so, it's beyond unethical. It's just despicable. It's really illegal. You cannot, that's sexual assault. You can't go up and grab women's bodies, particularly their butts or their tits or their genital area, without their permission or consent. That's sexual assault. Another form of game that I didn't include under the category of nonverbal game would be alcohol and drug game. Now, here's the interesting, and you've heard me mention this on a few videos prior. There was a time when it was considered legal to use alcohol and drug game to basically, like, say, for example, get a woman sloppy drunk and then take advantage of her, or give a woman some marijuana or cocaine and then take it. Like in the 60s, 70s, and at least the first 2/3 of the 80s, that shit was actually acceptable. Like you wouldn't be accused of date rape if you did that. But starting with somewhere between 1988 and 1990, that's when that type of game became illegal and began to be categorized as date rape. Yeah, that's when it was somewhere between 1988 and 1990 when that type of game began to be categorized as date rape. So you can no longer use alcohol to get women to give in to your sexual advances, or drugs to get. So those are the two types of nonverbal game I left off: physical coercion game and alcohol and drug game. But so pushing those to the side, there's two types of verbal game and there's three general types of nonverbal game. Two types of verbal game and three general types of nonverbal game. And I will very, very briefly touch on each one. Let's start with nonverbal game. Nonverbal game. There's three general types of nonverbal game. And that would be looks game, money and status game, and what's known as sub-communication. Sub-communication. Matter of fact, let's start with sub-communication. If you've been a long-time follower, man, you know I bumped heads with a few conventional PUAs in regards to the whole notion of sub-communication. If I had to name two by name, one would be James Marshall. James Marshall, who was once considered the top pickup artist from Australia. He's real big on sub-communication. He's real big on sub-communication. Then a guy named Yad, who was once considered the top pickup artist in London and the UK in general. He's real big on sub-communication. What is sub-communication? Sub-communication would be, it would almost be the same thing as what's generally known as sexual innuendo. Sexual innuendo. But yeah, sub-communication involves either one of two things, if not both. Is if you were to approach a woman and you say start caressing her forearm or caressing her hand in a very seductive manner, you caress her mid to lower back in a seductive and suggestive manner. You caress her thigh, in particular her inner thigh, in a seductive and suggestive manner. You play with her hair or touch her face. You don't really say much, but you emphasize a lot of seductive and sexually suggestive touching. That's one form of subcommunication. Number two would be how you use your eyes. How you use your eyes. So just going up to a woman and looking at her with a look that basically says, I want to fuck the shit out of you. But you don't actually say, I want to fuck the shit out of you. You just more so give her a look that says, I want to fuck the shit out of you. That would be a form of subcommunication. Here's my brief thing on subcommunication. I'm not totally against subcommunication. I'm not totally against it, but I don't believe in using subcommunication exclusively. In other words, I believe in using subcommunication in conjunction with direct verbal game, i.e. Mode 1. That's what I believe in. I believe in using subcommunication in conjunction with direct verbal game, i.e. Mode 1. But I don't believe, I wrote 2 articles where I basically expressed that I don't believe in subcommunication by itself. And here's the simple reason why. It's because if you're dealing with a woman of my 5 archetypes, reciprocator, rejector, wholesome pretender, erotic hypocrite, manipulative time waster. If you're dealing with a reciprocator, you can get away with just subcommunication by itself. You really can. If you're dealing with a reciprocator, you actually can get away with just subcommunication by itself. But if you're dealing with a woman who's a wholesome pretender, an erotic hypocrite, or a manipulative time waster, you're not going to have any success. I guarantee you're not going to have any success with a wholesome pretender or an erotic hypocrite with just subcommunication by itself. And even more so, if you're dealing with a manipulative time waster, she's going to run circles around you. And that's probably my number one argument against subcommunication. If you're dealing with a manipulative time waster, an attention whore, cock teaser, financial, non-financial favor seeker, or some other form of a manipulative time waster, she's going to run circles around you if you try to use subcommunication by itself. So that's my criticism of subcommunication. Again, subcommunication works great if you combine it with direct verbal game, and even for some indirect guys. If guys are more so into indirect verbal game, if you were to combine it with some form of indirect verbal game, it could probably be effective. But by itself, nah. Yeah, no. Again, if you're dealing with a wholesome pretender, it's going to be ineffective. If you're dealing with an erotic hypocrite, it's going to be very ineffective. If you're dealing with a manipulative time waster, it's going to be grossly ineffective. Grossly ineffective. So that's my thoughts on subcommunication. Next will be money and status game. I would say of the 5 general types of game I have listed on this chart, that's probably the most prevalent in society among most heterosexual men. And I would say particularly beta male types. That's probably the most popular form of game, I would say, among really heterosexual men in general, but particularly beta male types. Most beta male types are socialized to believe the number one game that's going to work the most in their favor is money and status game. Money and status game. And that's simply when you use your career success, your financial success, your level of formal academic education, your overall degree of social status, popularity, and or fame, if you happen to have some degree of power and influence, or you have a wide variety of expensive material possessions that you think are appealing to women, you use one or more of those things I just mentioned as a way to increase and enhance women's motivation to want to date you and have sex with you. Yeah, that's simply called money and status game. Money and status game. Guys who would fall into the category of a trick and or a sugar daddy would fall into this category. Yeah, that's money. Again, of the 5 games I have listed on the show, that's probably the most pushed type of, promoted type of game among heterosexual men, and particularly among beta males. Particularly among men who are what I would refer to as beta male types. Like, that's what basically what a beta male with alpha traits usually use. You know, I have 4 archetypes of men. Total alpha males with beta traits, beta males with alpha traits, and total beta males. Out of those 4, the number one archetypic guy that most uses money and status game is guys who are beta males with alpha traits. Beta males with alpha traits. That's the number one type of game they usually gravitate towards, is money and status game. And then the third and final form of non-verbal game would simply be looks game. Looks game. Matter of fact, I've had some guys, both guys from the category of my haters and critics, but even some of my own loyal followers who have tried to accuse me. They say, Alan, you make it seem like the reason you've had this great success with women over the last 35 years is because of your Mole 1 approach, direct verbal game. But I think at least half the reason why you've had success with women is because you got it going on in the looks department. So you use a lot of looks game to pull women. I say this, that's not 100% true, but at the same time, it's not 100% false either. It's not 100% true, but it's not 100% false. I would say to one degree or another, my looks have played into a lot of my success with women, both for relationships as well as for casual sex. So I would never say that my looks didn't contribute to my success at all. That would be a flat out lie. But the thing I would argue is not the number one factor. I'll tell you the biggest example. If you own either my ebook, paperback, or audiobook version of Ooh Said Again, listen to my 6 read or listen to my 6 verbal seduction stories in Ooh Said Again. For example, verbal seduction story number 1. If looks was the biggest thing to help me get women in bed, then why did that woman in verbal seduction story number 1 then just give me some pussy based on how handsome I was? Same with verbal seduction story number 2. Same with verbal seduction story number 3. Same with verbal seduction story number 5. Same with verbal seduction story number 6. None of those women gave me any pussy just solely and specifically based on the fact that they thought I was handsome. See, that's when you know looks game is working for you. The number one time you know looks game is working for you is when women decide to give you some pussy just based on looking at you. You don't really have to use any verbal game at all, whether it be direct verbal game or indirect verbal game. You don't really have to use verbal game at all. Women are just going to give you some pussy just based on the fact that they find you physically attractive and sexually appealing. Like, I've always pointed out, the number one time you can say I got a lot of pussy based on looks game would be my senior in high school. Like, my senior in high school, I didn't really have much verbal game. Yeah, that's the one time I would say that I got a lot of pussy, but my verbal game was average to less than average, was my senior in high school. Just about all the pussy I got when I was a senior in high school was based on my looks, the combination of my face and my physique. My face and my physique. But yeah, that's what looks game is when you're able to get women in bed because of the aesthetic appeal of your face and or your physique. And in addition to your face and or your physique, your overall grooming, like the way you wear your hair, the way you trim your mustache, wearing cologne, dressing well, what else? Personal hygiene, taking a bath and or a shower every day, and everything just related to your physical appearance. Everything related to your physical appearance. So that's what's known as looks game. Like Ron Wheels in recent months has done quite a few videos that's centered on looks game and more specifically body game. Body game is about simply improving your physique. through eating right and exercising, getting your physique where it looks the best it can possibly look so that you become visual eye candy for a lot of women. Yeah, so shout out to Ron Williams. Yeah, he does a lot of videos on body game. Alpha male strategies. That's what he started out doing. Yeah, Alpha male strategies. If everybody know about him, before he announced that he was a dating coach, he started out being just a health and fitness personal trainer. He was helping guys improve their looks, their physique. Same with the young brother, Stefan Klinkskill, Steffes Cole. He started out as just a health and fitness trainer. He wasn't no dating coach initially. Both of those two guys started out just giving guys advice to do with looks game. Looks game. They didn't really talk about verbal game. They was all about looks game. But then they slowly transitioned into talking about verbal game. And of course, both of them have bitten off of a lot of my shit. Just keeping it real. They bitten off a lot of my shit. So anyway, that's the three major forms of nonverbal game. Subcommunication, money and status game, and looks game. Now, moving on to more of my emphasis, which is verbal game. Yeah, the other form of game, major form of game, is verbal game. There's nonverbal game and verbal game. There's two major forms, as most people know, of verbal game. There's direct verbal game and indirect verbal game. And one of the things that provoked me to upload this chart was that somebody asked me, Alan, sometimes I'm not clear on what distinguishes direct from indirect. Like, can you give me specifically what would let me know when I'm exhibiting direct verbal game versus when I'm exhibiting indirect verbal game? Direct verbal game is simply this. Anytime you approach a woman, initiate a conversation with her, or it could be she approached you and initiated a conversation with you. So it's not always when you approach her first. It could be when she approaches you first and initiates what I call mode zero. Mode zero. And as soon as that conversation gets started, you let her know exactly why you're talking to her. You let her know exactly why you're talking to her, which is usually because you find her physically attractive and sexually appealing. And then you proceed to let her know specifically why you ultimately want to share her company, which is usually for sex. Yeah, so that's direct game. So if you approach a woman and you, in one way or another, you let that woman know, hey, the reason I approached you and initiated a conversation with you is because I'm attracted to you, I think you're sexy, and I would like to become sexually intimate with you at some point in the near future. That would represent direct verbal game. You're not wasting any time with flattering, entertaining small talk. You getting right to the point within the first 5-10 minutes of your very first conversation with a woman. You let her know exactly, this is why I approached you. This is why I initiated a conversation with you. This is why I ultimately want to share your company. That's direct verbal game. My brand, of course, in specific form of direct verbal game is known as the Mode 1 approach. The Mode 1 approach. Not only do I believe in being direct with women about the fact that I want to have sex with them, but I believe in being specific about what type of sex, such as long-term monogamous, long-term non-monogamous, short-term monogamous, or short-term non-monogamous. I believe in being ultra specific. When it comes to let women know my sexual. Now, some guys who promote some form of direct verbal game, they don't believe in being that specific. They just believe in specifically letting a woman know they want to have sex with them. But they don't believe in breaking it down specifically to, like, I want to say David X is like that. Like David X, he's well known for promoting direct game, but he doesn't always specifically let women know that he wants long-term non-monogamous sex versus short-term monogamous sex. He just generally lets women know he wants to have sex with them. He makes it clear that the reason he's talking to them is that he wants to have sex with them. So that's direct verbal game. Indirect verbal game. There's two general types of indirect verbal game, as most people who've read my books know. There's one form of indirect game that falls into my category that I call mode 2, and then there's other forms of direct verbal game that fall into mode 3. Oh, going back to direct verbal game, actually, not only does mode 1 fall into the category of direct verbal game, but also mode 4. Mode 4 falls under the category of direct verbal game, but of course, I don't endorse mode 4 because mode 4 is basically, I've always let Harley call mode 4 the evil twin of mode 1. The evil twin of mode 1. Because you have underlying vibes of anger, bitterness, resentment, frustration, and misogyny. That's mode 4. You're direct in the form of harsh criticisms against women, personal insults against women, and just overall antagonistic behavior towards women. So I don't endorse mode 4, but it is a form of direct verbal game. And then mode 2 and mode 3 are the two forms of indirect verbal game. Mode 2, again, as most people know, that's when your verbal communication style is vague and ambiguous. Vague and ambiguous. What does that mean? Vague and ambiguous. What that basically means is, on the positive end, you don't flat out lie to women. So, for example, let's say your objective was short-term non-monogamous sex. Let's say you met a woman and your objective was to engage in short-term non-monogamous casual sex with her. On the positive end, you wouldn't go as far as to lie to her and say, I want a long-term, emotionally profound, strictly monogamous romantic relationship. That would be a lie. You don't go as far as to lie to women. But on the negative end, you're not totally revealing and candid and forthright about the fact that you just want to engage in a few episodes of short-term non-monogamous casual sex either. You don't say either one. You don't specifically say what you want, and you don't specifically say what you don't want. You kind of leave things just open, what's known as vague and ambiguous. That's mode 2. Matter of fact, it's funny, I mentioned Alpha Male Strategy. Alpha Male Strategy started off endorsing mode 3 behavior. But now he's more so endorses mode 2 behavior. This young brother, I've been on his channel a few times, named Ramil Amir. That's what he said he's about. Ramil Amir is about mode 2. He's about mode 2. I even had one of my own followers yesterday try to suggest that he now slightly favors mode 2 over mode 1 because he said he feels like mode 1 makes you come across as a little too autistic, like you suffer from Asperger's syndrome. I was disappointed in this follower for saying that. Because that's what the guys at PUA Hate used to argue. That was the number one argument of guys on PUA Hate when it existed. They used to say, Alan, man, if you're mode 1 with women, it's going to make you look like you suffer from Asperger's syndrome or you're autistic. Because they saw mode 1 as just going up to a woman and just awkwardly blurting out your sexual desires and interests. I don't do that shit. And most people know that. See, that's where the concept of being smooth comes into play. Smooth and seductive. I don't go up to a woman and say, hey, Cindy, can I put my dick on your face tonight? Can I put my dick on your face and put it up your nose? I don't approach no woman like that. My shit would be like, hey, what's up, Cindy? You looking sexy in that outfit. I think you and I need to share each other's company so I can slide my hard, juicy dick all up in your tight, wet pussy and make you come on my dick. What's your thoughts on that? See the difference? One was awkward and corny and goofy. One was smooth and seductive. Wasn't nothing about that second example that was representative of being autistic or having Asperger's syndrome. But yeah, mode 2 is when you're vague and ambiguous. Again, you don't go as far as to lie to women about what type of sexual companionship you want, but you're not totally candid, upfront, straightforward, and forthright about what type of companionship you do want. Mode 3 is when you just flat out lie to women. Like, you'll make a woman believe you want long-term sexual companionship when you really want short-term sexual companionship. You'll tell a woman you want monogamous sexual companionship when you know deep down you really want non-monogamous sexual companionship. You'll give a woman the impression that you're cool with being her purely platonic male friend when you know deep down that you want a series of social interactions with her that are of a romantic nature or a strictly sexual nature, which is known what I call fun clubbing. Fun clubbing. See, that's mode 3. Or one other version of mode 3 is when you just don't approach a woman at all. When you don't approach a woman at all because you're too fearful of rejection. You're like a verbal coward. You don't approach women at all. That's another form of mode 3. So yeah, that's the 2 forms of indirect. It's mode 2, vague and ambiguous. Mode 3, when you're intentionally dishonest, disingenuous, blatantly misleading and manipulative, or just a flat out verbal coward. So those are the 2 forms of verbal game. The 2 forms of verbal game. So yeah, you have, number 1, when it comes to game with women, you have 2 general categories, which are verbal game and nonverbal game. And then the specific categories within those 2, nonverbal game, you got sub-communication, money and status game, and looks game. And under the category of verbal game, you got direct verbal game, which mode 1 approach would represent. My mode 1 approach would represent direct verbal game. And then you got indirect verbal game. That's what most conventional pickup artists promote, is some form of indirect verbal game. Indirect verbal game. All right, I got to prepare for my Patreon exclusive live stream. Talk to you guys next week. Enjoy your weekend.
Yes, sir.
Say it again.
Yes, sir.
Who's the king?
Alan, you're the king.
Say it again.
Alan, you're the king. You're dominating me.
Say it again.
Alan, you're dominating me right now. Mode 1.
Mode 1.
Daddy, can I go, please? You're the king.
Say it again.
Oh, you're the fucking king. Yes. Yes. Yes.
You're the king, Alan.
AKA the king of verbal seduction. You know, it's the tone of your voice, how seductive your intonations are, the vibrations that you could just reach out over the phone lines and stroke a woman's breast just by the sound of your voice, how you could make her pussy so wet just by the sound of your voice. That's actually very hot.
So you said my show was what?
I said your show is powerful.
Oh, say it again.
Your show is powerful.
I bet the king would fuck me really good.
Oh, yeah. Who's the king?
Alan Roger Currie.
Oh, yeah. Who's the king?
Alan Roger Currie. The king.
The king.
The king.
I have to agree with you on the communication piece, because I actually did take a session with Alan Roger Currie, and he gave me a line that I did not think was going to work, and it worked. And I was like, what the fuck?
Oh my God!
Man, he's the master. He's the master of the verbal seduction. He got that communication piece down pat.
It really worked.
Yeah.
It just simply worked, and I just didn't think it was going to work at all.
verbal seduction, man. I'm like, clearly, this guy's the Michael Jordan of seduction. Like, come on now.